In 1964, while shooting The Sound of Music, a strange noise nearly wrecked one of the film's most cherished scenes. It wasn't tragedy or drama that caused the trouble, it was laughter. The moment was so absurd that the actors couldn't hold their composure, and take after take fell apart. Studio executives poured money into fixing the problem, then buried what had happened for decades. The real story only surfaced years later, when Julie Andrews finally shared on television. So what actually went wrong in that gazebo? And why did Christopher Plummer, a man who reportedly couldn't stand the film, agree to keep the secret? The story begins in the mid-1950s. In 1956, German filmmaker Wolfgang Liebeniner adapted Maria von Trapp's memoir into 2 movies, Die Trapp Family and its sequel the following year. These productions were modest, sentimental, and unmistakably European. Yet they resonated deeply. War-weary audiences in West Germany were hungry for uplifting stories, and the Von Trapp saga delivered exactly that. The films became enormous hits, ranking among the most successful in West German cinema history. Their appeal wasn't confined to Germany, either. Audiences across Europe, and even South America, embraced the tale of a musical Austrian family defying the Nazis through courage and love. American studios, however, weren't impressed. Executives dismissed the films as amateurish and overly sentimental, comparing them to school theater productions. Nobody in Hollywood wanted to touch the material, until director Vincent J. Donahue got involved. Fresh off a Tony Award, Donahue had a gift for spotting emotionally resonant stories. Paramount asked him to scout potential projects, and he came across the German films. His first impression matched everyone else's, clumsy, dated, unpolished. But he sensed something genuine underneath the rough production values. The story had real heart. Donahue made a bold suggestion. Forget film adaptations. This needed to become a Broadway musical, tailor-made for star Mary Martin. That single idea set off a chain of events that would eventually produce one of the most successful musicals ever staged. None of it would have been possible, though, without an earlier decision by Maria von Trapp that many considered a mistake. Maria von Trapp wasn't a savvy industry player. She had no agent, no legal team, just a family to support. When German producers approached her in the early 1950s wanting to purchase her life story, she agreed to a flat fee of $9,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $104,000 today, a modest sum given what would eventually follow. Worse, she'd unknowingly given away more rights than she understood. Later, when Hollywood tried to buy just the title of her book to sidestep licensing issues, Maria refused. She insisted any adaptation had to tell her family story honestly and completely. By the late 1950s, Broadway royalty Mary Martin and her husband, producer Richard Halliday, were eager to bring the Von Trapp story to the stage, but they couldn't locate Maria. She was, in fact, doing missionary work deep in Papua New Guinea alongside Father Franz Wasner, the family's former musical director. Without phones or reliable communication, letters piled up unopened at remote outposts. Maria, uninterested in show business and focused entirely on her missionary work, tore up correspondence with a mysterious American couple pursuing a Broadway deal. Everything changed when Maria and Father Wasner returned to the U.S. by ship, docking in San Francisco. Richard Halliday met them at the pier and handed Maria tickets to see his wife perform in Annie, Get Your Gun. Maria attended mostly out of courtesy, but Mary Martin's performance captivated her. Still, she had to break the news that she'd already sold the film rights years earlier. Even so, she gave the Hallidays her blessing to pursue a stage adaptation anyway. That small nod of approval launched one of Broadway's most enduring legacies. Initial plans called for the musical to blend authentic Austrian folk songs with just a couple of new compositions. But when producers approached Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein to contribute 1 or 2 songs, the songwriting duo pushed back hard. They'd write the entire score or nothing at all. They had no interest in their work sharing space with traditional ballads. That ultimatum reshaped the entire project. With Rodgers and Hammerstein still finishing Flower Drum Song, the musical was shelved temporarily. When they eventually returned to it, they scrapped the folk song concept entirely and composed an all-original score, including now legendary songs like My Favorite Things, Do Re Mi Edelweiss, and Climb Every Mountain. The Broadway production opened on November 16, 1959, at the Luntfontein Theater. starring Mary Martin as Maria and Theodore Bikel as Captain Von Trapp. Staging the show cost $400,000, a substantial sum at the time, but demand was overwhelming. Advance ticket sales alone exceeded $232 million. Mary Martin was nearly unstoppable, missing only a single performance across the show's entire run of 1,443 performances, which stretched almost 4 years before closing in June 1963. By the summer of 1960, movie studios were already fighting over the screen rights. 20th Century Fox eventually won the bidding war, paying $1.25 million, more than $13 million in today's dollars. The price tag was especially bold given Fox's precarious finances. The studio was still reeling from the disastrous overspending on Cleopatra, which had gone $15 million over budget. Buried in the contract was a clause that would prove enormously consequential. If the film earned more than $12.5 million, Rodgers and Hammerstein's estate would collect 10% of the profits. Co-writer Howard Lindsay reportedly laughed off the clause, convinced the movie would never come close to that figure. He was spectacularly wrong. In the early 1960s, Julie Andrews was already a Broadway star, celebrated for originating Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady. When it came time to adapt that show for film, though, studio executives passed her over, deeming her insufficiently glamorous for the big screen. Audrey Hepburn got the role instead, despite needing her singing voice dubbed for most numbers. The snub stung badly. But fate intervened when director Robert Wise was searching for his Maria Von Trapp. Initially unconvinced Andrews was right for part, he changed his mind after Disney showed him early footage from Mary Poppins. Minutes into the unfinished film, Wise reportedly told his screenwriter they needed to sign her immediately, before any competitor could. Andrews accepted the role of Maria for a flat fee of $225,000, about $2.28 million today. It was solid pay for an up-and-coming actress, but the deal included no royalties or box office bonuses. Once she cashed the check, that was the extent of her earnings. Mary Martin, by contrast, had negotiated Broadway profit participation and ultimately earned more than $8 million from the stage production. Fox apparently didn't consider Andrews established enough to warrant similar terms, a decision that would look increasingly short-sighted. Mary Poppins turned out to be a massive success, and Andrews won the Academy Award for Best Actress. During her acceptance speech, she pointedly thanked Jack Warner, the very executive who rejected her for My Fair Lady, a subtly pointed gesture that delighted the audience. Despite The Sound of Music becoming her signature role and eventually earning hundreds of millions worldwide, Andrews never received a cent beyond her original salary. Casting Captain Von Trapp proved surprisingly difficult. Robert Wise approached several major stars, including Sean Connery, fresh off his breakthrough as James Bond, and Richard Burton. Even Bing Crosby was considered. None felt right for the role. Christopher Plummer eventually took the part, though he had serious reservations about the script, which he privately mocked as The Sound of Mucus. He turned the role down multiple times before Wise flew to London to persuade him in person. Plummer agreed only on the condition that he could help develop the character further, adding depth and giving Captain Von Trapp his own musical moment. That request led to the creation of Edelweiss, written specifically for his character rather than being, as many assume, a traditional Austrian folk song. Even with these changes, Plummer struggled throughout filming, later admitting he drank during several scenes, including the emotionally charged farewell concert sequence. Despite his personal misgivings, his performance gave the captain real depth, capturing his transformation from a rigid disciplinarian into a loving father. Like Andrews, Plummer worked under a flat contract with no royalty stake, even as the film went on to gross over $286 million globally.